today with your humble narrators, Brian Jones, Patrick Ryder. Gentlemen, we're coming off a few weeks of positive news, some of the old warm and fuzzy stuff. But sadly, like the rest of the news we're seeing these days, hasn't been very positive in the marijuana industry, the cannabis industry. Brian, we were talking a little offline, and maybe we can highlight on the fact that in a world full of inflation where gas prices are going up, food prices are going up, marijuana prices are miraculously going down. Do you guys have any thoughts on that dynamic?
Yeah, I think the inflation pressures that it's going to siphon through, right? Gas is now, you're seeing it up at insane levels, things that we've never seen. It's going to siphon through. I think it's going to create a balance, but really it's just supply and demand, right? There's a lot of supply in the Michigan market. It was bound to be a bidding war at some point. I don't think we're there yet. You just kind of running into, I know one reason that I read was that people don't have their stimulus money anymore, and they're kind of not as cash flush, which is an interesting one. I read that in an earnings article. You could certainly point to that. So it's, it's dropping the demand, which means there's an oversupply, which means that Michigan has some pricing pressure. I think you're seeing that in a lot of part of the country too.
It naturally makes sense as prices for, true necessities like food, gasoline, gas is pretty inelastic, I would say. Even with really record gas prices in 07 and 08, people still had to spend money on gas. A lot of folks, if they want to work or bring their kids to school or, get anywhere, they have to spend money on gas, sadly. However, Patrick, I guess we're learning real time that marijuana isn't a necessity, even though some guys like Jackie Paper would tell us otherwise. What are you looking at this week that has piqued your interest or has popped up on your radar in the business?
So some fun stuff, some interesting stuff. And, in returning from New York, I can't help but go back and just bang on New Jersey and all the fraud that's happening there. I saw an interesting article this week about the way that applications for licensees were being processed. And there's a certain amount of fraud that's being perpetrated around using female lead applicants, to support licensees and getting ahead in the lottery. In typical New Jersey fashion, these folks are finding loopholes, creating loopholes, or knocking down doors in all the wrong ways. So I think New Jersey is continuing to lead the market in what we'll call National Enquirer headlines. It's a lot of fun over there.
I disagree. I think there's another state that could match the Enquirer headlines, and I'm going to throw out a flyover state. I'm going to throw out South Dakota.
I was just going to go there.
Oh, you were? All right. So I think they're giving Jersey a run just because they're the madness that's happening, right? They have a vote, passes medically, passes recreationally. The governor then comes out and says you can't have both on the same referendum or same voting cycle. So then Senate passes it, and now it's been shot down again. I mean, just,
was it shot down, or now they're putting it? So the Senate passed it. The House said no, it needs to go back to the people. So this is I'm fat because I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because I'm fat cycle. And it just keeps rolling around here in the Dakotas. So you're right.
I guess it's funny, who would have ever thought the smartest people aren't working in .gov? Whether it's New Jersey or South Dakota, I thought they had a monopoly on all the brain power, but it's we're finding out that's not the case.
It's just red tape. It's things that they're making harder. We sucked in football in high school, and not because we didn't have athletes. It's just because we didn't have enough, I guess. But our coach always said,
what was your graduating class?
130.
George,
I think I was in the 1100s.
Yeah, exactly. They would have kicked your ass, Brian.
Of course, different sizes. But what our coach used to say was the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid, right? And we kept it really simple and stupid and lost a lot of games. But when you're going and making cannabis laws, we're not using the KISS principle. This is becoming a state-by-state meltdown. Here's a good one for you in New York, and I read this today. You can go and buy a lounge membership and go smoke weed inside the lounge, or whether you smoke it all and take it with you or whatever, $15, I think was the daily charge, 35 for the month. And you can get in there and smoke weed because New York, in their genius, says there's no licenses out there for dispensaries to be open, but it's not illegal to possess and use it. So they've kind of got the cart before the horse. And now people have seen the loophole in that. Is like, well, if I'm not going to get busted for smoking a joint, then these private clubs are going to pop up, and they won't say where they're sourcing the cannabis, but there's another one where it's just, how does this make sense? How does it make sense for there's no taxes going to the New York government on that, right? It's a club membership. You go in there and buy what you want to use, you use it, and you leave. It's insane.
Well, you can certainly find it on the corner of Times Square, as we found out this past week. It's
you
readily
smell it
available.
everywhere.
Anybody that's listening, corner of Times Square, there's a guy. There's just a guy.
Standing next to the guy still selling his hip hop CDs, which I was, it's been
And
a little
tapes.
while. I used to be in New York City every day for like 15 years and I grew up in the area, but I hadn't been back in a little while. And I was really, Pat, I went over to the hotel and there's a couple of guys with the CDs. I guess they're still profitable on that corner at the crossroads of the world where guys are still selling dope and not getting in trouble for it.
Yeah, I think we can disagree on what profit looks like in New York City, George. $18 for a cup of coffee is a little bit ridiculous. But we're here to talk about the state of the industry in cannabis. And while we are knocking on states, let's take a second to get down into SEC land in Georgia, where at this point, nobody's growing marijuana because the people that were issued the licenses are now being sued by the people that weren't issued the licenses. So while we just kind of knocked on .gov, we can also have an agreement that, being left out and being kind of the short side of the party here is leading to some delays in Georgia. And fear that nobody's going to get, be able to join the party down there. So again, on a state by state basis, we're seeing different rules employed. We're seeing different tactics being employed, and we're just seeing delays across the board. So the happy-go-lucky train that we thought was going to come in 2017 is yet to leave the station on a nationwide basis. Brian, you said something earlier that I wanted to hit on. You mentioned earnings. You read an earnings report. And for the listeners that don't know this, Brian and I do quite a bit of work with public companies in the cannabis space and have the ability and listen to a lot of earnings calls and kind of participate in that process from an investment standpoint. It's earnings season. And I think that there's a lot of interesting news out there. If you take a look at some of the Canadian LPs that are traded on the NASDAQ, struggling to maintain their listing status. So if you look at a Sundial, and I think there's a couple others, you got to have a certain dollar amount. So you got to be worth $1 in order to trade on the NASDAQ. And they all got warned. We've got another one of our friends, Hexo, that's out there right now with some significant financial problems, and they've been issued a couple of letters and just received some funding. Yeah,
they just got a lifeline. It's the second debt deal that Tilray's done. I find that interesting. And Hexo, I think, is the number 3 producer in 3 or 2 in Canada. Have a really good, I wouldn't call it monopoly. I wouldn't call it monopoly. They just have a really good footing in Quebec. They're Quebec-based, really kind of dominating that market at one point. I haven't looked at them recently, but Tilray doing that deal, Tilray has some lofty goals, and so the CEO of that company is going to do everything he can to make it happen, which is fun to watch. You have these deep pockets. You got to use them. You got to get the money out there, get it performing. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. They also did the deal with MedMen. Canada went first. They had a lot of hiccups. The U.S. is finding new hiccups that Canada couldn't have dreamed of. Just getting back to, you talk about the earnings, but you get back to what you talked a little bit about .gov article that George put up for us on the rotation with Biden's administration basically telling everybody, don't be investing in cannabis companies if you want to work in the administration. It's an interesting take, given that.
Well, can I just stop you really quick? Who wants that reputational risk working in his administration? Because for all intents and purposes, at the in November, it's going to be a bloodbath for Democrats. And let's be honest, Joe's numbers in the polls are not strong at all. And if you ask the odds makers in Ireland to wager if he's going to run for, will he make it? And secondly,
Well-
is it good for your brand to be associated with Joe? So wouldn't you rather take the risk in the market with cannabis versus what's in it for anybody attaching themselves to Joe Biden?
Well, George, you bring up a good point. I'm going to try to steer clear of too many politics,
Right.
but
Understood.
I have yet to see many Democrats be bad for someone's brand, and I'll stop right there. So I think an interesting aspect of what he's doing, what that signals is, well, obviously it's federally illegal. So you're going to get drug tested if you're working in the in the government. So it seems kind of obvious. But then again, the investing part kind of bothers me is, are we all going to get, letters of, are you investing in cannabis? And it could only be for people working in the government, sure. But I just think it kind of reiterates the point I said last week. Stop looking at the DNR in front of a politician's name when it comes to cannabis legislation, because those things are true. There are Democrats that don't like it. There's Republicans that do. So,
but it also seems at odds to what he said in his own State of the Union, where he says he wants to pivot away from or incentivize, pharmaceutical problems such as the opioid crisis. And hey, guess what? We have a nice alternative. It's been proven scientifically time and time again throughout history. And with all that's going on in the world, forget about his own standing with the nation and the powers that be. And, there's obviously geopolitical problems, a lot of problems at home. And this is what he decides to make a point of view on. I mean, it's just, meanwhile, a lot of politicians of various party affiliations seem to be trying to move forward and be hashtag progressive. And you got the head of the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, saying what he's saying. It kind of seems to be at odds with a lot of the stuff that we have been talking about the last few weeks.
Well, I think that we can all agree that politicians are paid to talk out of both sides of their mouth. And it's interesting to note that became a priority and made headlines. And perhaps it made headlines because of the algorithms that follow me around the internet as well, right? It found me. I didn't necessarily go out and find it. Right. But as you look at it, right, he said, don't invest in cannabis companies. Well, if you started in 2019, you might have wanted to heed that advice because you would have lost your shirt in the last 2 years in the market, 2 years plus. But with that being said, the demand for cannabis continues to grow. And so we've got Maryland now. They're moving forward with their own ratification of some sort of decriminalization. We're starting to see, I think the last poll numbers that I saw 68% of Americans are now in favor of some sort of federal legalization. And so regardless of what Joe is telling you, and regardless of what all of the rules and all of the regs that are out there that are putting up barriers, this industry continues just to knock them down, right? You see what's happening with Hexo. They got some money. Everybody's continuing to raise money. We are on the precipice, and I believe this now, based off of some conversations that we had in New York, we are in the precipice of getting safe banking passed in some form or fashion, probably in the next legislative session, and hopefully to the desk of Mr. Biden beforehand. Now, is he going to sign it based off of what he said? I have no idea, but that's
going to be real interesting.
Yeah, it'll be real interesting to see what he does when that crosses his desk. The will of the people versus the want of the man. I think that's a very interesting thing to kind of keep our eyes on. But it's coming, right? These things will keep coming.
South Dakota doesn't give a shit about the will of their people. So I don't expect anybody in the government to give a shit about the will of the people on a nationwide basis. I'll be shocked if we see anything. It just depends, right? We're going to talk about it a little bit next week. I think we have a really great guest lined up. We're going to dig into that a little bit more, right? Does safe banking do everything we need it to from our industry versus to the MSOs, to anybody, and will it get there, right? Ukraine's going on, they're trying to do another COVID funding. There's so many headwinds And that doesn't even take into account that we're being told that we're in a stand down with Russia, right? It's just it's a crazy time. It'll be curious to see how fast somebody moves on marijuana legislation. And another thing that we heard in New York and really rang true is, does a sitting president, when all the governors and all the mayors are sitting around saying we need to be tougher on crime, decriminalize a drug that's been chastised for 60, 70 years? Is that really something that he wants to throw in there? That's going to get some people voting against him for sure. And like you said, we'll see if we get there, but
He's
it's
got enough votes against him already. I mean, forget about that. We're talking about, we've got 755, almost 760 banks right now that are actively taking on cannabis deposits. And we've got, a quarter of those that are out there lending right now. Safe banking is something that is just a stroke of a pen that creates a little bit more opportunity, but it's 1,000 cuts. Right? The death of marijuana prohibition in this country is going to come by 1,000 cuts. First, it was Colorado, then it was Washington, then it was California.
Yeah,
and
point.
it's on a state by state basis. And now we're getting into the federal level with safe banking and the MORE Act and expungement and those types of things. It's going to take people not giving up. And I don't see it happening. I see it just kind of steamrolling at this point. So again, I don't think this is going to be one fell swoop. I don't think it's going to be a short road to hoe. But it's coming, man, and the people in this industry, and we're about to hear from one who's been in it from jump, a guy named Ochosa from Curaleaf Holdings. He's going to tell us a little bit about his journey, but it's not stopping. It's just going to keep going.
Interesting. Well, I know we'll have a lot more to talk about, and it's, with all that's going on in the world, it's still a hot topic, and we hope that everyone continues to listen and read and follow us on LinkedIn. Hit the subscription bell on LinkedIn. We're on iTunes now. There was a little hold up there, but we managed to get through that process. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll have a little session with Al right now, and we look forward to talking to you guys again. Brian, any final thoughts before we talk to Al?
No, I think Patrick's point about a death by 1,000 cuts, that's great, because I keep wondering why so much red tape's being performed, and I think Patrick hit the nail on the head. It's just going to take time.
Okay, and without any further ado, the largest marijuana company in the world, Curaleaf, and we have a senior thought leader here with us today. It's Al.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you find us, wherever you are. Welcome to your spot in the rotation. Today, we are very fortunate to have a good friend of ours join us. We lovingly refer to him as Uncle Al from Oregon. We met Al through our dealings in the insurance world, and his story is phenomenal. He is truly one of the OGs in legalized cannabis. I'm not going to say how old Al is. I'm not going to say how young he is, but I think the legal part of it should give you away the fact that he is not some deadhead with a long gray beard. To that end, I will let Al kind of introduce himself a little bit. Al, take it away.
Hey, thanks a lot, Patrick. First of all, I am so stoked to be on here with you guys. Obviously, we've had dealings over the years, so to be in a spot where I'm actually able to chat, I guess, openly about my story and about the world that I live in now as far as legal cannabis. Yeah, it's definitely exciting times. But I probably wouldn't go as far as phenomenal. So I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that, Patrick. But like you said, my name is Al Ochosa, located up here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. I'm the Director of Insurance Risk and Safety Compliance over at Curaleaf, which is a multi-state operator in this space. But, I do, first started in the cannabis industry all the way back in 2015. After parting ways with the insurance industry after a couple of decades, it was interesting to see where my next venture would bring me. So, 2015 was definitely the year that I definitely took a leap of faith. in 2015. You know, it was just starting out here in Oregon. We were watching what, you know, Colorado and Washington would look like after a year or so. So 2012 was definitely, in my mind, a little too early, especially coming from, you know, I guess you can call it the corporate world. But 2015, you know, I was blessed to be introduced to, you know, several people that eventually changed my life in the direction that I went. Starting off in September 2015, you know, meeting one of the co-owners of the, you know, co-founders of the company way back when, introduced through a good buddy of mine that I went to the University of Washington with. He introduced me through a group text actually on a Monday. Ended up hooking up with the gentleman on a Friday, received my offer letter that Monday or that Sunday, and started Monday hitting the ground running.
Hey, Al, you know, it's funny you say that, right? You're talking about ushering in and everything, but I started this off by saying you're one of the OGs, and legitimately, 2015, coming from, you know, you're probably in that first wave of professional transition, as I like to call it, where we saw seasoned executives from different industries, and yours happen to be insurance, so that's where our crossover sits, but starting to come in and really take part of the cannabis industry. And in 2015, you weren't part of this monolith, right? You were part of a large company in Oregon, but certainly not a multi-billion-dollar market cap company. If you could share a little bit about what the transition has looked like from day one, sitting at a desk at a cannabis company, eyes wide open, to where you are today, where you're heading up DEI initiatives and you know, and social equity platforms for a mega corporation that, you know, handles, you know, employs thousands and thousands of people.
Oh, I still have to pinch myself, Patrick. You know, it's to come where, you know, where I came from, and looking at us today is absolutely amazing. I mean, in 2015, when I was hired, I must have been like one of the first 25, 30 employees there. And we were probably doing, you know, under 100 grand a month in a little 10,000 square foot warehouse in Southeast Portland, right? That was my introduction to the cannabis space. You know, and really that first year was interesting because we were still under the OHA, Oregon Health Authority at the time. So it was kind of that transitionary period, right? Before, you know, before the adult use rules kicked in what was that, October 2016 is when the adult use rules kicked in Oregon under OLCC, Oregon Liquor Control. But yeah, that first year was interesting just because, again, you know, everybody was trying to make their mark in this industry, you know, through revenue, through branding. You know, I was fortunate enough to hook up with really one of the larger, you know, original cannabis powerhouses in Oregon. That's, you know, still around to this day. You know, there's still, you know, a large number of Oregon legacy companies that are still around, which is great to see. But that just goes to show that, you know, the Oregon market, you know, is working compared to a lot of the newer states that you're seeing out there right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, you know, seeing us, you know, go from, you know, I think in the spring of 2016 was when we originally, you know, combined forces with Select, you know, and it was right before the introduction of the adult use rules in October 2016. So from there, I mean, the next year was when we moved into a larger space in close in Southeast Portland, which was an exciting time. Because, you know, we saw a lot of folks early on come on board to, you know, really help that mission. And it was probably that next year was when the exciting growth happened with expansion into, states like California and Nevada and Arizona. And really, at the beginning of 2019 was probably when, the gosh, I guess the mood was very heightened. We were just entering into those new states. I personally was working on a few applications for expansion. Um, and then that next year in 2019 was really when we had the transformative announcement of, the Curaleaf acquisition.
Sitting there in Oregon, right? And it's interesting to me, right? You've got, Pacific Islander kind of background, transforming into Washington, and a very conservative kind of, I'm assuming, very religious background as well, understanding what the culture of the Philippines is like. But you've got that, and then you transition down into Portland. And by all accounts, Portland is a free-for-all, whether it's the show Portlandia or the fact that they have basically decriminalized usage of all drugs. And so I want to start there and ask you about what's going on in Portland through your eyes, because you had the lens to the medicinal cannabis, adult use cannabis, and then expanding on a national basis or a national level with your acquisition by Curaleaf. And so I'm curious as to what you see, what's going on in Portland, and whether, and you mentioned this, right, state by state rolling out, do you see this kind of, I don't want to say gateway because it's cliche, but I'm going to say it because I speak in cliches, a gateway approach to the legalization or at least the decriminalization of more drugs, as we've seen what's happened in Oregon?
And I'm speaking personally just because I've always had this thought, I've always thought that, any type of drug use really should be treated as a public health, looking at it through a public health lens. Sure, you got the large traffickers out there. Yeah, those guys are, doing things that they shouldn't be, right? But when there's so much new knowledge nowadays, as far as plant-based medicine, it's I've also always taken the outlook that we really should stop the use of the word recreational. For me, whether you're a card carrying holder, a patient card holder, or an adult over 21, there's always going to be that aspect of wellness when it brings in, whether it's mental health, especially during something like the pandemic, or the ability to get a good night's sleep through the use of cannabis. I've that's always been my personal feeling about it, and something that I've chatted with folks in the past, whether they're old clients or friends or family. That's always been the tack that I take with folks, because now obviously they can't use the fact that it's it's not illegal now in certain states that have passed laws, so you can't use that as an excuse anymore. My parents who live in Washington, I remember having that discussion when it first passed in 2012, and they still argue, to this day. But I drop little nuggets here and there, and I also know that cannabis isn't for everybody, so I'm never out there to change minds, but to just give a different perspective that somebody may not have taken in the past, whether it was their environment or their upbringing or their political affiliation, what have you. That's why cannabis is such an interesting subject that really brings a lot of people together in having that constructive conversation. Again, never would have had this conversation 10 years ago. No way. And really, even 10 years ago, there were really, a handful of either clients, colleagues, friends and family that knew. But to be able to openly have this discussion now, again, it's a two-way discussion. I want to hear about what people think about cannabis, whether they're behind it or they're against it or they just want to find out more. Those are the kind of conversations I have nowadays, but it was definitely a lot harder a decade ago, I can tell you that.
Al, that's great. I couldn't agree more. It's a discussion that needs to be had, right? When you grow up with dare thrown at you, you're just not given the whole story. The whole story is much more complicated and has many more layers. So I couldn't agree more there. It's everybody's personal journey. The other thing, one of the things I kind of want to finish on, we've talked to a single state operator, we're talking to a multi-state operator, we talked to somebody, a social license application licensee actually in Colorado who's truly just getting started. And now we're talking to the biggest MSO, someone who, it wasn't your goal when you got going, but certainly a result of your success, what you've been part of. And your CEO came out and said that big cannabis can be good cannabis. So we want to talk about the good things that Curaleaf is doing, because we know that that's, the charge that needs to be led by the bigger companies with the big bankrolls. And you guys have some great programs. I want to give you a chance to talk about those.
No, absolutely. I was very, very pleased to read that article that the CEO of Parallel just put out. Again, calling out all the big players in this industry that, how can we make billions and millions of dollars each year when, there's people that are still in prison or over this plant that we're making a profit off of. Those folks that are still living with the stigma of, an arrest or conviction way back when, nonviolent conviction. For me, that was really one of those things that really, my eyes were open to early on back in, my early 20s and 30s. I always questioned, hey, how come, people are being treated this way over a plant that seems to do so much good. And the fact that the conversation is fast forwarded over the last, couple of decades, really, is absolutely amazing. I'll never stop saying that, the industry needs to be able to support, those communities that have been harmed by prohibition. One of the personal things that I've also done over the last couple of years was also really bring this message out at the local level. One of the different many side hustles that I do is I also chair the cannabis policy oversight team for the city of Portland. I've actually chaired it for the last 3 years. I'm getting ready to finish up my last few months in my term. But I'm excited what we've created over the last few years. Our annual reports that really bring out a lot of good recommendations to City Council as it relates to the cannabis ecosystem that we have in the city of Portland. We're going to be releasing our most recent report here in the next week or so, which really focuses on things like, cannabis competency. You can't expect to be regulated by regulators who don't even know the basics about cannabis. So we're looking to get an approval on a pilot program for competency in the city of Portland. That's one of the recommendations that we had on our report. So, those kind of things, it's little baby steps. being able to work not only at the local level, but on the national level. Me personally, I haven't been too involved with, a lot of the initiatives at the U.S. Cannabis Council and with, the National Cannabis Association. We have large and very dedicated and experienced, passionate lobbyists, working at that level. So for me, I tend to do what I can when I can. I guess the good thing for a lot of people that I work with is I rarely say no. So that's probably why I'm part of a few different things, not only the cannabis policy oversight team for the city of Portland, but I also do a lot of work with the DEI task force at Curaleaf. Again, that was one of the things I was very excited about. When we were first acquired by Curaleaf, I was thinking, oh boy, here comes corporate cannabis, but the fact that they still have the time to focus on a lot of good things, including working with communities that have been impacted by prohibition through our Rooted in Good initiatives. Those I'm very excited to see somebody at our level, having that conversation and really putting a lot of the other, our other competitors to task. Again, we lead this space as, one of the larger MSOs in the United States through our Rooted in Good initiatives. Those things, the Rooted in Good initiatives, it's really focused on a handful of pillars, things like diversity, equity, inclusion, DE&I.
Yep.
We also focus on social equity, and we also focus on sustainability. As part of our DEI initiatives, I was blessed to be selected as one of the initial co-chairs for the first of many employee resource groups that Curaleaf put together. I actually co-lead the Curaleaf and Color employee resource group on a national level. I partner that task with our staff pharmacist, Duke Claude Charles, out of New York. Him and I have actually gotten to be really good friends as part of this initiative, but most importantly, we've also been able to spread a lot of awareness and education, and being able to really highlight, people of color within Curaleaf as well as in the industry. Because again, without it, inclusivity just brings more ideas, makes for a better company, whether you're in cannabis or not. So, I'm really excited about the path that Curaleaf is on, and, there's just more to be done. One of the big initiatives that I'm excited about is our 420 by 2025, where basically we've made a commitment as a company to do business with 420 traditionally impacted and minority-owned companies throughout the cannabis supply chain.
Who do you guys own in Colorado?
What's that now?
Who do you own in Colorado?
Who do we own?
Yeah, don't you own somebody in Colorado, or am I wrong, Brian?
We just recently acquired the Los Sueños group last October. We closed on that.
There we go.
Yeah, so
I got a guy for you. You know what? I'm going to help you with your
stuff.
420 initiative. I'm making an intro when we get off this call.
Yeah, no, it's exciting because there's minority-owned companies, women-owned companies out there that traditionally would have difficulty getting into this space. So being able to partner up with these companies on a local basis to go ahead and get their products and their name out there um, is just exciting. Because again, we're really leading the charge on this, but you kind of have to. I mean, you have the biggest opportunity, the biggest megaphone to be able to spread this kind of message. And um, my hope is that we continue to do it right, as well as the industry continuing to do what they need to do.
Al, that's actually a great segue. And as much as you are going to hold your competitors' feet and hold this industry's feet to the fire to do the right thing and make some positive changes, and we're going to follow up with you in a couple weeks, couple months, a year or two. We'll figure out the right day. Probably at MJ BizCon, where I know your lips get a little looser, as all of ours do. But we're really excited to see what you guys are going to do through these initiatives, and I think it's it really speaks to the fact that this industry is drawing talent. And Brian and I work in the insurance industry, and we lost a good one, and Al to the cannabis industry. But the cannabis industry gained from people that are doing smart things, doing cool things, and bringing that level of expertise to just continue that evolution of this industry, to show that it's not just a bunch of guys in a garage growing good weed. It is making sustainability changes to the the manufacturing product lines. It is making social changes to the way that we look at people that have had felony convictions for a plant, right? It's the way that we educate people that might not be on board to say, okay, I may not partake, but I'm also not going to persecute. And I think those are big deals. And to that end, Al, we really thank you very much for coming on the show. And more than that, we thank you for all that you've done since 2015 and coming over from wearing a blue blazer. And for those of you guys who can't see it, he's actually wearing a blue blazer, which is hilarious to me. But
yeah, like, one of the things that I've always told people too is that cannabis brings out the authentic me. You'll never find a more authentic Al than Al during this era of cannabis legalization. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. It's always good visiting with you.
The beautiful thing about it, Al, is it's kind of working that way for a lot of us on this call. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I wish, I could fast forward another 6 years to see where it'd be at, but you know what? All I know is there's surprises down the road for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just gonna live it, my friend.
Thanks,
Al.
Al.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you, George.
Absolutely. Thanks for visiting.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. We hope you enjoyed Al. We're going to have him back on. Al's got a lot more information we're going to get out of him, but he's been a great friend to us, and we thought it'd be good to have him on here in our first run. Just so everybody knows, every week we try to talk about Florida and the amount of smokable flower that is sold there every week. 84,000 ounces last week. To 688,000 medical patients, which I find pretty impressive. Next week, we got another great guest. We hope you join us. Hit like, subscribe, heart, whatever you need to do. Instagram, wherever you need to be. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you like what you're hearing, hit that button. You won't miss an episode. And we'll be back with you next week in the rotation.